Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Bill. We are going to be in the fantasy trip, the In the Labyrinth book by Steve Jackson Games. We are continuing the spell series where we are looking at an IQ grouping of spells for wizards and hero characters, specifically wizards. The reason is wizards purchase these spells at a single IQ point per spell. So if your wizard had, we're doing 16, so if he had 16 IQ points, each spell on this list he qualifies for because his IQ is high enough, and then he'd spend 1 point for it. If you had a hero character, a non-wizard, who wanted to learn these spells, he'd have to have the IQ score there, and he'd have to pay 3 IQ points to learn it. So he would not learn spells as easily as a wizard character, but he could still learn it and use them. So let's start looking at the IQ 16 spells and see what you could get from this spell list. There's a 7-hex fire spell. It's like the fire spell, but cast on any 7 connected hexes. So you can use it to create a wall. You can kind of fill an area. It'll cost you 4 mana. And I believe that one lasts like 3 or 6 turns, something like that. 7-hex illusion. Creates an illusion of anything occupying no more than 7 connected hexes. Costs 5 mana. And again, it would have about the same duration. 7-hex wall. Like the wall spell, but affecting any 7 connected hexes. Note, although you cannot entomb a figure by putting a wall in its own hex, this spell can let you put walls in every hex surrounding a figure, thus trapping it. Costs 6 mana. So if you needed to isolate something so you didn't have to deal with it for part of the combat, you could do that. Create/destroy elemental. As create elemental, this spell will create one elemental, which will do the bidding of its creator for 1 day. It will then seek to escape. If its creator wishes to avoid this, he must either make a 5-die roll against his IQ, so a 5d6 roll against IQ, or use the control elemental spell and try to force it to destroy itself, or use the destroy elemental version of this spell below. If he makes the IQ roll, the elemental will serve him for a further day and then try to escape. And this will repeat over and over again. Anytime an elemental is ordered to do something which threatens its existence, it gets a 3d6 roll against its own IQ of 8. So it's like a 60% chance that it won't succeed at making that IQ roll. If it makes the roll, it escapes. In order to create an elemental, the wizard must be in a place appropriate to that elemental. See the elementals. And must expend 5 mana plus 1 for every mana the elemental is to have. Or not mana, for 1 for every strength the elemental is to have. As destroy elemental version of this spell destroys all elementals within a 5 megahex radius of the caster, no matter what their strength. However, if an elemental is in its element, as in an earth elemental underground, or an area that's appropriate for the creation of the elemental, this spell will not affect it. For instance, a salamander in a volcano, or an undine in a river would be unharmed. A free elemental will be very hostile to anyone it suspects may plan to use this spell, and will certainly attack a wizard who attempts it and fails. Mana cost is 10. The next one is Death Spell. It's a thrown spell. When this spell is cast, compare the strength of the wizard with that of the victim at the moment. The weaker one immediately dies, and the stronger one loses that much strength. Therefore, if a wizard uses this spell on a stronger opponent, it means his own death instead. Armor stone or iron, flesh, etc. do not protect against this spell, although the spell shield stops it. Long distance telepathy allows a wizard to send a short 5-word message to anyone he knows, whatever the distance, allowing two wizards who know each other and know the spell to converse for 30 seconds. They split the mana cost 12 mana. Mega Hex Sleep. It's a throne spell. A sleep spell which affects every figure with a strength less than 20, except the wizard himself, in a single Mega Hex, or any single figure with a strength of 50 or less. Otherwise, just like sleep above, costs 8 mana. So a Mega Hex is like 15 feet across. If you're looking at a grid, the square you're standing in, all the squares you would threaten around it in a 5-foot radius would make up a Mega Hex from one corner to the other, going through that middle. In hexes, it's built that way too. There's just not as many people that could get around you as they can in a grid. Also, where was it going? That was it. Now we're on Summon Dragon. Brings a 7-hex dragon, strength of 60, dex of 14, IQ of 20, movement allowance of 8 on the ground, movement allowance of 20 in the air. Its breath does 3 dice damage, so 3d6 damage. Its claws do 2 dice damage, so 2d6 damage. Its armor stops 5 damage per hit. To serve the wizard. Costs 5 mana, plus 2 each turn the dragon stays. And that's a pretty powerful creature to have on your side in a fight. Trance. The wizard sleeps for an hour of game time. He may ask the GM any question. If the GM makes the wizard's dex roll successfully, he will give truthful hints, not a complete answer. Phrased in an oracular way. If the roll fails, the GM will give misleading hints. The GM should not allow more than 1 trance on the same subject per game week, or more than 2 on any subject per day. Costs 10 mana. And here's a good one. Write Scroll. Lets a wizard create a scroll. The wizard must know both the Write Scroll spell and the spell to be written on the scroll. Mana cost, none. Writing a scroll requires a wizard's whole effort for as many days as the IQ required for the spell. He must make his dex roll once on each of those days, or his pen slips and he ruins the scroll. Therefore, mana cost is inapplicable. It just takes days of work. A scroll cannot be made for any spell that creates a magic item. So any spell that creates a magic item is the only spell you can't put on scroll. Everything else is fair game as long as you know the spell. Another caveat to this is if you have a spell book, you could use Write Scroll to write scrolls from a spell book. Or at least that's what I would allow for my wizards. Since spell books aren't very common and they're harder to put together, it would make a lot of sense that they could do that. Now, another thing is you could reduce the amount of checks they need to make. You could, or whatnot, just to make it easier to make scrolls, but this is up to the game master. So game masters, use your own discretion if you want it to be really hard for them to come once they have this to come into enough scrolls to do stuff. Because even if you had it, say, take the same amount of days, but they only had to roll 1, 2, or 3 times on their decks to make it. Because most wizards with a really high IQ are not going to have a very high dex. And this game, I have noticed, does not encourage making of magical stuff for the players. Now, it encourages them buying it. It just does not encourage their ability to make it. that ends the IQ 16 spells and a little rant at the end. If you enjoyed this, let me know which spells you found most interesting. Put them in the comments below. Until we all game again, guys.